All right, today we're going to talk about one of the biggest cautionary tales in modern business. It's the story of how a company bet billions of dollars on an AI model and then watched it fail spectacularly. This is all about the incredible promise of artificial intelligence and what happens when we forget about its very real dangers.
Okay, let's just dive right in with this. This quote from Zillow's CEO, Rich Barton, this was a huge admission. It came at the very moment his data-obsessed company had to admit that its biggest, most ambitious AI project had gone completely off the rails. This wasn't some minor technical glitch. This was a total crisis of faith in the machine.
And that really brings us to the core question of this whole thing. How does a company that's built on using algorithms to predict housing prices get it so catastrophically wrong? And listen, this isn't just about Zillow. This is a critical lesson for any organization out there that's putting its trust and its money into AI.
So to get what happened, we've got to start with Zillow's grand plan. They launched this business called Zillow Offers, an iBuying service. And the idea was super simple, but really powerful. Use their gigantic pile of housing data and their fancy machine learning models to predict a home's future value, buy it, do a few quick repairs, and then flip it for a tidy profit. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, as it turns out, a lot. The financial fallout was just staggering. The company lost $10 billion in market value in just one quarter. And get this, during a red-hot housing market, they were losing an average of almost $80,000 on every single house they sold. The algorithm wasn't just a little off, it was disastrously wrong. So here's the thing you really need to understand. The failure wasn't because of bad data. It was because of a bad assumption. The algorithm was built on this core belief that what happened in the past would predict the future. But when the housing market's rapid price growth started to cool off, the model just couldn't adapt. It kept overpaying for homes, basically assuming the rocket ship was still climbing, right as the fuel was running out. And Zillow's whole mess is a perfect example of a much deeper issue. Data can be incredibly deceptive. You can have all the right numbers, all the right information, and still end up with precisely the wrong conclusion. This is what happens when we don't really understand the kind of AI system we're working with or the human stories lurking inside our data. See, Zillow was using what's called a probabilistic system. Think of it like a weather forecast. It's not saying it will rain, it's calculating the likelihood of rain. These systems are incredibly powerful, but they can also be really fragile when the world around them changes. It's totally different from a deterministic system, like say a basic spam filter. That's just a strict set of if-then rules. Same input, same output every single time. Zillow was betting billions on a probability, not a certainty. And this leads us to one of the most fascinating, kind of mind-bending ways that data can just straight up lie to you. It's a phenomenon called Simpson's paradox. This is where you see a clear trend in individual groups of data, but that trend completely vanishes, or even reverses, when you combine all the groups. I know, it sounds impossible, so let's walk through a quick example.
Okay, now just take a look at this. If we go department by department, there's absolutely no sign of hiring bias. In the Aura office, both wizards and witches have a 50% success rate. Down in the Department of Mysteries, they both have a 25% success rate. So if you look inside each group, everything looks perfectly fair, right?
But watch what happens when you combine the data. All of a sudden, it looks like there's a huge bias against witches. So what's going on? Well, there's a hidden variable. The wizards overwhelmingly applied to the department that just happened to have way more jobs. So even though the hiring process itself was totally fair within each department, the overall total gives you a completely misleading picture. That is Simpson's paradox, and it shows you how an algorithm could learn the exact wrong lesson if it only looks at the big picture.
Okay, so if data can be this tricky, how in the world do we protect ourselves from falling into these traps? This is where we get to the solution. And it's not about giving up on AI, it's about building a really strong framework of rules and responsibilities around it, what the industry calls AI governance.
And look, this isn't about creating a bunch of red tape to slow down innovation. Good governance is actually about making AI safer, more reliable, and at the end of the day, more trustworthy. It's a set of principles that make sure we're building systems that are not just powerful, but also responsible. Let's break down a few of the really important ones. First up is fairness. This means you are actively hunting for biases, just like the one we saw in that Ministry of Magic example. It's about checking your training data to make sure everyone is represented, and then constantly monitoring your model out in the real world to make sure it's not creating unfair outcomes for different groups of people.
Next up, transparency.
Now, even if your AI model is some super complex black box, you still have to be able to explain how the whole system works. This means writing down what data it was trained on, what logic it uses, and how its recommendations influence a final decision. It's really about being able to answer that simple question: why did it do that?
And this one is so important: accountability. When a team ships a model into the world, their job doesn't just end there. Someone, a specific person or a specific team, has to be responsible for that system's performance, its risks, and its results. You just can't have an algorithm making billion-dollar decisions with nobody at the wheel.
Okay, so we've got our principles, but what does a practical, day-to-day playbook for managing AI risk actually look like? Well, for a really cool idea, we're going to look completely outside of the tech industry, to a field where the stakes are literally life and death: medicine.
I mean, think about it. The pharmaceutical industry has spent over a century perfecting a process for managing the enormous risk of innovation. They have a rigorous system for testing, validating, and rolling out new products where failure can be catastrophic. And there are some really powerful lessons in there for anyone building AI.
This comparison tells the whole story. Just look at the difference between developing a new drug from scratch versus repurposing an existing one where you already know it's safe. The cost plummets from over $2.5 billion down to around $300 million. The timeline shrinks from over a decade to just a few years, and the success rate triples. This is the core idea of de-risking. Use what you already know is safe before you go big.
So we can apply that exact same playbook to AI. We can treat its development just like a clinical trial. Phase 1 is a safety trial for your data, checking for bias and gaps. Phase 2 is an efficacy trial, testing the model's performance offline in a controlled way. Phase 3 is a limited, large-scale trial in the real world. And just like with medicine, you absolutely need post-market surveillance, constantly monitoring the model after it's deployed to catch problems before they become disasters.
So we've got our governance guardrails and we've got our pharmaceutical playbook. But there is one last piece to this puzzle, and honestly, it's the most important part of all. It's not about the code or the data, it's about the people who use it.
Yeah, this quote from Harvard Business Impact, it just nails it. Your AI models, your data pipelines, your dashboards, that's all just gear. It's incredibly powerful stuff, for sure, but it's not the guide. It can't read the context, it can't understand the nuance, and it can't make the final judgment call.
At the end of the day, the companies that really win with AI won't just be the ones with the best tech. They'll be the ones that invest in developing these uniquely human skills: the adaptability to change course when a model is wrong, the judgment to override a bad recommendation, and the ethical leadership to know when it's time to pull the plug, which is exactly what Zillow ultimately had to do.
And that is the question that every single leader needs to be asking right now. As we all race to adopt AI, are we just focused on building more powerful technology, the gear? Or are we also investing in the human wisdom, the judgment, and the resilience we need to use that technology responsibly? Because as Zillow learned the hard way, one without the other can lead you right off a cliff.